You know the sorry, I have to take a side note here because you know the Bette Midler version of Hello Dolly starts with Hello Harry, well hello Louis. How did she know? How did she know? Hello?
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Maxwell,
Hi, I'm Carolyn.
and this is Mutable Immutables, the show where we quibble queerly,
Yeah, sometimes we exchange pleasantries.
only if
How's
we're
it
feeling
going?
spicy.
Yeah, how's it
You
going?
know, it's good. It's going really good. Um, Everyone is gassing me about my mustache, and I'm living for it.
It really did. Last week or whenever we were kind of skeptical, but it did grow in nicely.
It did, yeah, and she's kind of slaying. It's like it's doing numbers on my Insta right now, which
So
I'm like,
funny.
it's so validating. Yeah.
Love
How are
that for
you?
you. I'm great. Thanks for asking. That's all.
Good. Oh, okay. I was like, that sounded loaded. I don't know if there's more,
No,
but
I'm like, yeah, no, I'm great. All good. Peachy keen. I've
that's
just
awesome.
been reading for the last couple hours. It's just yeah, a lot of reading. My brain is burnt and I have like 6 pages of notes out in front of me. But I'm excited
We love
for
academia.
today's notes.
Yeah. Yeah, today is going to be fun to talk about cuz what are we talking about today, Carolyn?
Well, um okay, so I just take a step back after last week's whirlwind of an episode where I was like, let me just spit out some facts. And I had to take a step back and I'm like, listen, it's really hard to find sources about like early gay community history if you don't have
Mhm.
institutional access to anything, which I don't anymore. So I was
Mm.
like, honestly, though, it existed in the shadows. So let me just like read more about what was going on in general, and I will draw my own conclusions about what was gay. So, we're actually starting way back in like the 1820s, which is insane because this is not a time that I know a lot about. So,
Yeah, I mean, the American education system is kind of like garbage, like hot steaming fire garbage to begin with, but like I feel like they just emphasize so heavily like the foundation of America, the Revolutionary War, and then Civil War, and then industrialization in the 1900s. Like they don't really talk about that like middle bit in the
yeah,
1800s. A lot of the 1800s actually they don't talk about.
yeah.
So this will be interesting.
So, um,
Cool. Well, and we're specifically going to be talking about
So, okay, yeah, a couple of different
theater,
things.
right?
So, yeah, sort of the history of like musical theater and entertainment in America. And then also the history of Times Square, and then also sort of the mob. Because we've talked in the last couple of episodes about like how tenement housing was like such a huge way for gay people to meet each other and like saloons and that sort of thing, but like where did the saloons come from? So it's kind of interesting. So,
This is
yeah, that's what we're
also a
talking
little
about.
bit it's a little bit intimidating for me as someone who holds a shiny and beautiful liberal arts degree in theater because y'all are about to see just how much I did not retain. Like
To
I
be
call myself
honest,
a
though,
theater person, but I don't know shit.
it doesn't have much to do with like it's more of like musical variety shows than I'll be talking about like actual Broadway theater. So,
Well, and then like yeah, theater just as not as a concept, but as a
theater.
cultural art form in the states was really finding its footing during this period because this was before the Broadway that we knew today. So,
Exactly. So, I'm just kind of stalling cuz I'm like, "Whew, I got to get into it." Is there anything else before we get started?
um No, I don't think so.
Cool. Then I have nothing else to stall with.
All right, well, let's get into it.
Actually, first, I do have to put out just like a general trigger warning because obviously we're talking about the 1800s and the history of entertainment in America, which is minstrel shows. And then also, we're going to talk about like the Civil War and emancipation of slavery and that sort of thing. So, just a
Yeah, I feel
general
like a
warning for
good
that.
trigger warning for just this whole little series is there's lots of racism, institutionalized racism that's being discussed, homophobia, um, potentially hate crimes, murder, violence, that kind of
Lots of
thing.
misogyny. Yeah,
Lots of misogyny,
among the rest.
SA probably as well. God knows it's the fucking entertainment industry. So anyway,
Well, not, yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So 1820s is where we start. Not for any particular reason. Um, but this is around the time where like we are getting to the industrialized version of America that we know now. We start to get huge wait not huge yet, but we start to get the first like waves of immigration past the original colonial settlers types. Um
and this was just to kind of put it in some context. This was like the height of the railway, right? This is when America was really
the
being worked on with trains and stuff, right?
A little later on,
Oh, okay.
actually.
I didn't do
I,
history.
That's that's okay. No, but you're in the right century though. You're correct. Um
Cool.
but so I didn't do much research about the railway, but it was mostly in California that was getting a ton of immigration from like Eastern Asian countries, and that's how we got our very first anti-immigrant law in I think 1881 was the Chinese Exclusion Act, and
Mm.
then that was later expanded to include it was so inclusive. It included all like Japanese, Korean, any East
We
Asian
love this melting pot
people.
because then when the Italians and the
Um
Irish showed up, we hated them too. We
yeah.
love it here.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so at first it was a lot of like okay, actually no, I'm not even getting into that yet cuz that's going to lead me into like the mob. So give me a second. 1820s minstrel and variety shows, the height of entertainment. Variety shows also include things like freak shows. Uh
Oh, like P.T.
so
Barnum, Greatest Showman, Hugh Jackman.
exact yeah, I don't know anything about The Greatest Showman, but like P.T. Barnum is absolutely a part of it. Um so if you're unaware, I'm so sorry to ruin this for you, but minstrelsy is the act of like caricaturing black people in America under certain like stereotypes, and it was these like musical like productions that was sort of like satirizing what was happening in the local community, but it ended up
It was
being
like just
just
racist SNL.
oh my god, it's so freaking interesting that you say that because the standard um like setup for a variety show uh which is like sometimes a minstrel show is like musical entertainment. There's a host or an MC, there's some jokes, there's like a skit segment and then like maybe some more music, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's how SNL
That's
is set
SNL.
up.
Yeah.
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 But that was like, the typical variety shows. Some had more like circus thing and ventriloquism or would have uh physic people with like physical malformities, I guess you would call it, just for people to gawk at.
Hmm.
If you've seen
Well,
Freaks,
and a
which
lot of
came out
times
in
these were traveling shows
1932.
too, right?
Yeah, there were different like troops, like Columbia was one like company that would like tour minstrel shows or whatever. So minstrelsy kind of uh grew grew alongside the abolitionist movement, and while it kind of at one point was like obviously still had these like characters of like black people, but a lot of times it was it was supposed to be like a positive thing, and it was really like lighthearted. Um and like as the abolition movement grew stronger, it was just kind of got the way it was described is it got more mean spirited, which like obviously it was always mean spirited because it's at its core racist. But it seems like at one point it was like a happy fun times, and like we're gonna parody like things happening in the community, and it's not always about black people, sometimes it's about Irish people. But it
Oh,
got
good.
to the
Just
point where
another
people
another
were like
cultural group.
pretty yeah, pretty turned off by it. But um it really burnt out during the Civil War. Uh but the minstrel shows themselves actually lasted some up until like the 1960s.
Oh my God, the 1960s?
Yeah, oh my god, yeah. It's insane. um
Jesus Christ.
Also around this time we have a lot of Irish immigration, and there is a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment because New York was super waspy at the time. Well, America was, I guess, super waspy at the time. There's a lot of
America was
anti-Catholic
founded to
sentiment.
be waspy.
I know. If you don't know, that stands for what? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So
Yeah.
me. I don't know. You, I guess. Yeah.
A lot of people, yeah.
Both of us
Well, I'm not a
are
I'm
kind of
not a
waspy.
Protestant, but
I mean, neither practicing, but you grew up Baptist. Um,
exactly, yeah.
anyway, so
A
okay.
cultural wasp.
So, yes, raised wasp. So, these local street games start to form, specifically like a lot of culturally based ones, like Irish, that sort of thing. The 5 Points becomes a settlement uh for like Scotch Irish, German, Welsh immigrants around between Broadway and the Bowery, which is like sort of around Times Square, um, which we'll sort of be getting to. But so this is when the 5 Point gangs has most control over New York City. There was just like so little oversight over the ports and everything that there was just so many easy ways to skim off the top and get involved with like illicit racketeering, which a racket is just a scam basically. It means you set up a laundromat, a money laundering front like a laundromat or whatever,
Mhm.
or uh like being a like middleman, like I'm gonna steal your shipment and you can pay me to get your shipment. um i'll like I'll take your shipment to the rails if you pay me this much, that sort of thing. So the 5 Point gang is kind of like the most um influential at this point. Wait, no, not at this point. Like throughout, I guess, like the 1870s through like the 1910s. So we have these like street gangs forming that will eventually become the 5 Points gang. Anyway, that was kind of out of order, but there we go. Okay, back to entertainment. So, 1830s. We get the rise of saloons and music halls as a cursor to vaudeville. And a music hall is just what it sounds like, but it's kind of the basis for like cabaret, where there's like a performer and an audience, like usually sitting at at tables or something, but there's like interaction between the performer and the audience, and you're supposed to like
It's like a dinner
engage,
show.
and like it's like a drag show.
Yeah.
um yeah. So entertainers are encouraged to make people stay and drink, so you're trying to do more and more outlandish things. Um, and saloons start to get a bad rap for being like lowbrow entertainment,
Mm,
and
mhm.
people of high class go to the opera and go to
Right.
like actual go see Shakespeare plays performed, and saloons or music halls were just kind of like for Say the
Which is
working
really
class.
interesting because Shakespeare in his day, a lot of times his shows were seen as lowbrow.
Yeah. Oh my god. They like there was a Shakespeare revival. I guess because
Hmm.
like the rise of centralized theater, it makes sense. But
Yeah.
like these bitches love Shakespeare. Um. So the Panic of 1937. There was some economic night. Oh my god. I keep forgetting we're talking about the 1800s. This is why I keep getting confused. Okay. 1837 economic downfall uh, meant that theater and opera were even more inaccessible, and people are having to go to like minstrel variety saloons, music hall shows, that sort of thing. Um, in 1849, there was a riot in Astor Place Theater, which ended up kind of solidifying the difference between like upper class would go see theater and opera, middle class would go see like minstrel and like melodrama shows, and then low class would go see saloon uh like bar shows. But this Astor Place riot, I'm not going to get into it because I didn't write down all the details, but it's basically like a conflict between these two guys. One McCready, who was from Europe, and one uh named Forrest, who was from the USA. And they had this feud. They were both really well-known actors, but like there's at this time there was I wonder why starting to be a lot of anti-British sentiment among the working class, uh not unrelated the fact that the working class was so much made up of Irish people at the time. um so McCready being a European, people started to kind of like rally around Forrest, and there ended just being like some back and forth between the two, and like there was a riot where like 30 people were killed. But
Oh my God.
yeah, kind of gay. Um, anyway, so 1860s. Um, obviously we're about to get into the Civil War, so like not a ton is happening in the
Oh, I
entertainment industry. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I did want to ask, with these burlesque shows and with these variety shows and stuff like that, did you come across anything in your research about like early form drag shows? Because I know that that as a form of entertainment kind of started to date back to, I mean, it's not drag shows that we know today, but like performers would get in drag for these types of um,
You were
shows.
like
So I was wondering,
you were like 2 steps ahead of me.
ah, damn.
So hold that thought. Put a pin in
Okay.
that.
Okay.
um okay. In the 1860s, burlesque gets big in the United States. Um early 1860s. So it came from France, obviously. European burlesque was more about like parody comedy. It was just kind of like funny little shows. And it would often parody famous plays to kind of like make fun of the Shakespeare crowd. So one
It's like a
is
spoof.
yeah.
It's like Weird Al.
uh exactly. So one was Hamlet. Which one's the one? No, Macbeth is the one with witches, right?
I mean, I think a couple of them had witches, but that's the most popular.
So I don't know that. No, of course I can't remember the character's name, and it's gonna come to me later. But Macbeth and like whatever the fuck's this guy's name is, it starts with a B or something. Walk in, and the three witches are like, "Hail, hail, hail!" And the guy goes, What does that mean? What are they saying?" And they goes, "Oh, we're just anticipating your reign."
That's cute.
What? Like that's hilarious.
That is cute. That holds up
1860s.
too.
Like, yeah,
I love
goddamn, that's
comedy.
funny. So, unlike European burlesque, United States burlesque being ends up being about the nudity. Uh and that's about it.
And how the turns have tabled.
That's what I'm saying. Um in 1969 is the first Hamilton Lodge Ball. Do you recognize that name?
1969 or 1869?
1869.
Okay.
First Hamilton Lodge Ball, which eventually became like the Hamilton Lodge Masquerade Ball, and it obviously didn't start as a drag ball, but it was a masquerade ball, and so it was an excuse to go in costume and conceal your real life identity.
And listen,
Um,
when you give gays a reason to wear a costume, they're eventually they're gonna make you regret that choice.
exactly. Um, So this is the time when, so 1870s, New York starts to get a large wave of Italian, Slavic, and Jewish populations immigrating there. So obviously, this just means like the tenement houses are filling up uh, by the dozen. This post Civil War, we start to see what is known as bachelor culture. And it was something like at one point, 67% of men between the ages of 15 and 34 were bachelors, which is like kind of crazy. And like the median bachelor age was 20, or medium age to get married was 26 for men, which was considered really old too. And it was just about like sporty things, smoking cigars, and hunting, like, and like gambling, drinking, just without all those pesky women in the way. So it was just for like men to get together and do men things.
Just guys being dudes, you know?
Yes. And apparently this is a huge thing. This was a huge thing in Italy because there's so much gender segregation because of the whole Catholic no sex before marriage thing. And so it's like the women hang out with the women and the men hang out with the men. So men hanging out with men, that's nothing. They're just guys being
Just guys
dudes.
being dudes.
So,
Not touching peepees at all, not even a little bit.
right. So, around this time is when we start to get like the YMCA, which like at some point it was being nicknamed like 4 out of 5 or something because like 4 out of 5 men were there were gay. Um, so to get the like the YMCA and like these this tenement housing and Hell's Kitchen for like the low wage workers, and it's all single men because like they've like all come over from like left their wife and kids at home and are paying the money back, so nobody brought their families. I think this was different to the Irish wave of immigration where a lot of them brought their families. I think I read that. I'm not sure. Anyway, um okay, 1880s, uh minstrels are not really the thing to do anymore. Vaudeville takes over. So, while vaudeville isn't the same as minstrel, vaudeville would often contain, as like one of the segments, it would contain like a minstrel show traditionally at the end of it.
Now
So,
I have a
still not
question
great.
about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this came up in your research, but minstrel shows falling out of fashion or like not being the thing to do anymore. Was that a direct result of the Civil War, or do you think people just got bored?
Well, I mean, they still existed. I think like the majority of people just kind of like moved on.
Hmm.
There were
So
better
just kind of
things.
like fell out of fashion. Yeah, they just
Yeah, we
got
had
bored.
vaudeville now. We had burlesque and like music shows now. Um so vaudeville takes over. It's a variety. The way it like differs from minstrelsy, it's a variety entertainment with a comedic tone and no psychological or moral intentions, where minstrel would often like focus on the current issues or that sort of thing. This was just like no thoughts, head empty, just being silly.
Just
um
vibes.
just apolitical, yeah. But this also takes its inspiration from the Victorian English music halls, which were uh, entertainment venues that traditionally contained music acts, but also British pantomime, which is men in dresses. That's like the basis for British drag. um, yeah, and female impersonation was a big part of it. So
Which dates
vaudeville,
back to Shakespeare. Just saying.
yes,
Drag.
yes. um, so took inspiration from both uh the like variety shows, still like the aspect of the freak shows, and then also the like female impersonation and burlesque, uh, all meshed together to form vaudeville in the 1880s. Um, in the 1890s, cinema begins to develop, though it was initially seen as vulgar and lowbrow entertainment. Meanwhile, the 23rd through 34th Street becomes the Great White Way, which is named that because of all the like pretty Broadway lights. Um, so this is just like the beginning of Times Square starting to sort of materialize. Um, because of industrialization in lower Manhattan and all like the factories, like that sort of thing, pushes people and therefore vice up from the Tenderloin district. And it becomes known, what would become known as Times Square, is currently nicknamed the Thieves Lair. But
I love
in,
that.
yeah, um, but at this point it was like the center of the horse carriage industry or something, and so like some hotels were popping up and it was sort of starting to become populated. But in 1895, the Olympia opens up as the first theater, and it was like a multi-venue complex that had like theaters but also like smaller rooms, and you could do like multiple shows at the same time. And apparently it's bustling by 1898. So
I think also
1900s.
that was when the construction of the subway was like starting to get underway, right? I think that was late 1800s. I could be wrong,
Yes. Oh
but
my gosh. Yes, you're literally always one step ahead of me. um,
ah, maybe
so
I do know history.
I know. So in 1904, the New York Times moves to what was formerly known as Longacre Square, and they name it Times Square, as well as the newly built subway station.
Ah, look at me.
Oh my god. So, and then in the 1910s and 1913, Times Square is uh, the end of the Lincoln Highway, and so obviously where you have a ton of transportation, you're gonna have a ton of crime, corruption, and sex work, catering to theater goers, actors, workers, cruisers, that sort of thing. So, Mob 5 Point saying this is when they have their strongest like hold on power, but like the Italian mob is kind of like starting to take over from there. um I think like maybe the guy some guy went to some guy had an attempt on his life and he like pulled back, and like the Italian mafia sort of like took over where they had left off. um but they didn't really take hold until like 1920, like before prohibition, I guess. I don't know. Um anyway, okay, so this is when Times Square starts becoming known for like sex work. So because all the theaters were cropping up, and theater was fucking huge at the time, and like as well as like the burlesque and the saloons and all that sort of thing. So they're building tenement houses in Times Square for all the traveling actors to stay in, but then also low wage workers are staying there as well. But then there's also like the upper class, either the upper middle class gays, or just like they would they would call it slumming when like middle class people went to go like visit the red light district and go see what
Oh
those
yeah.
crazy gays are up to. It's called slumming. But so you had sex workers who could cater to them. You had sex workers who catered to like the actors, sex workers who catered to the workers, and then like people trying to cruise, and like all of these things are happening at once in Times Square.
Well, and then the cross section of that and the like variety and burlesque shows kind of, I don't know if they started to arise at this time, but peep shows,
Oh my god,
um,
yeah, no, that was
which I know
definitely
were
also a
huge in
thing.
the 70s in Times Square,
Yeah.
which just a quick um, sideline. I was just looking because a lot of this was sounding familiar. If anyone has watched, and this is ahead of our timeline, but
Hmm.
if you want to like get kind of a peek into what Times Square used to be like before it became what it is today, um, I believe it's in the Netflix docuseries Crime Scene, the Times Square Killer. I think that's where
Mm.
they go over some of the like red light district aspects of Times Square in the late 60s and early 70s with a lot of the sex work and peep shows. And then there was also a little
Yep.
bit of like porn theater stuff happening then. But that was, again, that's after our time then. But it
We have
just made me think of it.
so many porn theaters, but this is like the seeds of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so also in the 1910s and 1960, no, ugh, Jesus, 1916, this gossip magazine tabloid thing came out that we talked about last week, which was the Broadway
Mm.
Brevities.
The
And it
Broadway
was
brevity.
yes, it was written by this guy Steven, and of course I can't remember his last name.
Just a guy. Just a
His
Steven.
first name was Steven. He has a four-letter last name. I always remember stupid things like that. Anyway, he writes this pamphlet, and in order to sell more copies, he starts writing about more and more salacious things, including like going undercover into the gay world, and in a roundabout way, exposing gay people as to where to find other gay people, such as Times Square. And it was said that
Or the
like,
Y.
well, exactly, yeah. And it was said even the most obvious gay man stood out less in Times Square. Um,
Which is still
yes,
true today.
yes. So in the 1920s, musical theater begins to really take inspiration from vaudeville acts, as well as like the preeminent jazz age, and we have like hot jazz coming up from the South at this point. But the pansy craze begins. The pansy craze is when people just got so obsessed with like everything that gay people are doing, and like um, theaters would like hire a gay MC just to like be gay and
Just to
funny.
be gay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it, um, which is something that like carried into like old Hollywood movies. You can have a gay character, but he has to be like the silly butler or like the comedic character. They're not allowed to have like an inner thoughts or anything like that. Um, but so yeah, this lasts until like the 30s. And in the 30s, Times Square just becomes so depressing, and it's the depression. Oh my god. um,
It
and
was the Depression, which was really
It was the
depressing.
depression, which was very depressing. And apparently, like the whole vibe just started to change for the worst. And a lot of the theaters closed, so all you had was like saloons, um, and just like nitty gritty, like nothing really happening. In addition to this, in 1927, the first talkie was released, and like
Mm.
cinema had been a thing since like the 1900s, like a little bit before that, but like at the time you still had to have like the movie happening and like a live musician plays along with the movie. Side note, I have seen that happen live with a Charlie Chaplin film playing and an organist playing live along with
I
it.
love
He
that.
had like never seen the movie. He just like played along with what was happening. It was insane. But when Stockies came over, and you could like see a celebrity for like 5 cents and show it multiple times, and all these people get to come see these like glamorous celebrities. There was no need to go see a show on Broadway anymore. And in addition to this, the Broadway stars themselves start to move to Hollywood. So that's it.
Well, so in that same time, that's when I mentioned last week the Federal Theater Project, um, which was uh, it was part of FDR's New Deal.
Hmm.
To it was less about bringing attention and accessibility to the culture and more about creating job opportunities, um, to employ a bunch of workers who had been forced out of work because of the depression. So I didn't compile this into like fancy notes. I'm just gonna like read a little bit from Wikipedia to like give a rundown on the Federal Theater Project. It didn't
Cool.
last for very long. It only lasted for about 4 years, but it served to both give these lower and middle class workers jobs, and then also to bring people back to the theater when they had been going to see the movies and stuff instead, or at that point talkies or cinema, whatever they called it. Um, but so it was founded in 1935 by FDR as part of the New Deal. um, to fund live artistic performances and entertainment programs in the United States. So it was not just limited to Broadway, but that's where we see the biggest effect of it, because that had already started to become the hub of these live performances in this live theater, because this was like in the birth of Hollywood. Um, it was one of five larger projects sponsored by the Works Progress Administration, and it was created not as a cultural activity, but as a relief measure to employ artists, writers, directors, and theater workers. So, like I said, more about the jobs, but it served to benefit in a couple different areas. Um, National Director Hallie Flanagan shaped the Federal Theater Project into a federation of regional theaters that created relevant art, encouraged experimentation in new forms and techniques, and made it possible for millions of Americans to see live theater for the first time. So even though accessibility was not the goal, it was one of the results, which it's also around this time, and because of this, why we start to see some of those like old classic Broadway standards, like you think I don't know, like Hello Dolly or My Fair Lady or whatever. They didn't come at this time,
Hello.
but
You know the
it's
sorry, I have to take a side note here because you know the Bette Midler version of Hello Dolly starts with Hello Harry, well hello Louis. How did she know? How did she know?
I don't want to talk about that.
How did she know
I
about
don't want to
them?
talk about that or Liam Payne's plastic surgery. Did you see that?
Oh, okay, Bethany Frankel. Jesus Christ.
Right.
No, let me not comment on people's physical appearance. Yes, I saw it.
Well, but he outsold the others. Doesn't matter. Anyway.
Okay.
Um
Moving on.
so back to the Federal Theater Project. Although it only consumed about 0.5% of the allocated budget from the Works Progress Administration and was widely considered a commercial and critical success, the project actually became a source of heated political contention, which is really frustrating because it was doing so many wonderful things for the arts and entertainment industry, creating all these jobs, creating accessibility, giving people a reason to write and create art. Um, in a time of just like general hopelessness and despair. Um, and so it was hugely successful, but it was due to political tension, read racism, that it started to become dismantled. So Congress had responded to the project's racial integration and accusation of communist infiltration, and ended up canceling the Federal Theater Project on June 30th, 1939. Um,
Wow.
it's so I mean I'm not going to get into the whole wiki article about that, but
Yeah.
it's just so fucking frustrating because this was this was government funded arts that was actually successful, because there wasn't like a lot of censorship, although had it been kept alive that it probably would have started to get really toxic in that way. But it was not about trying to convey any sort of propaganda or any sort of message. I mean, the playwrights could if they wanted to, but it was not some like shadowy weapon that the government used to like indoctrinate the citizens of the country. It was literally just to create jobs, and because it was so open-ended like that and was more about the jobs and the accessibility or the culture, people were able to create the works that they wanted to create, and they were able to showcase um, these amazing projects. And then because of racism and because of integration and potentially communist ideals, it was canceled.
Yeah. Um so yeah, the 20s and 30s, obviously we talked this whole time about how the 20s was really progressive culturally, but like politically as well. Obviously the New Deal, like um and then like the labor rights pushes of the 20s, like this was like actually a super progressive time for America, but then like you said, threat of communism took hold
Well, I mean,
in
it's
our very
always one
houses.
step forward, two steps back, right? And so that's why we're starting to see kind of, I don't want to say sequels, but that's why like the times that we're living in now, with them being similar, like with the context being a little bit similar
Oh, you
to the
mean a moral
1920s and
panic?
30s and 40s. Yeah, moral panic, economic strife and trouble, um,
Yeah.
recessions again, you know.
No
It's
kidding.
yeah. People
Um,
panic and then they want to blame an easy scapegoat, and currently it's drag queens and queer people. But
so
anyway,
anyway, that's the history of variety shows. That's the history of SNL.
which plays into the history of gay people because gay people love theater.
Oh, yeah, that was kind of implied this whole time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't talk explicitly about it, but yeah, I mean, we're focusing on queer history, and so this is like really
Sorry.
contextual.
It's
But
supposed to be like implied.
yeah, well, because I mean, with the tenement houses and with the YMCA, and then with things like the Broadway brevities, like accidentally signaling to queer people where to congregate,
Yeah.
and with
Not
queer
to
people just
mention
already
like
congregating in these areas,
yeah,
they
not to mention
obviously
like
started to gravitate towards theater and
sailors too are like
yeah.
classically gay.
Oh yeah.
Just saying.
And I imagine next episode we'll probably talk about World War II, so we can get
I
all into
keep
that.
saying I keep saying that I'm gonna get to it, but honest to God, there is like so much I do so much reading just to talk about like dumb shit like variety shows. There's so much more research I need to do to talk about the wars, especially just specific to New York City.
Yeah, which is it's also hard because like the effects of that are not limited to New York City. Um
No, I
but
yeah,
that
and
was a big
yeah.
one.
But anyway, maybe one of these days we'll talk about the war.
Well, and listeners, the good news is neither one of us is an alpha male, so we can talk about the world wars and it's not going to be horrible to listen to, I hope.
Oh my god. I mean, it'll be horrible to listen to, but because it's boring.
Cool.
But
Love
whatever.
that vote of
Sorry.
confidence.
Anyway, um okay. Cool. What's the question? What are you into?
Oh yeah, okay. So, um not too long ago, I impulse bought. I am such a danger to myself and others, if we can be so real, because my boyfriend and I we were just like hanging in bed watching TV the other night, and I was just like looking around because we had just like redone my walls to like put up some of my plant shelves, and like I don't know if you can see, but I have like 1,000 pictures of Raja on my
Is it
wall.
from the
They're all from those
calendar?
free
Yeah.
calendars that we got. Yeah. It's the only decor really that I have, and so they're just all over the place. I'm gonna replace
They
them
were
at some
selling
point,
those
but
for
um,
$75 and we got handed one each for free. And I use it every
yeah,
day.
on like the last day of
Yeah.
DragCon, yeah. Um, and the calendar is kind of slay. Like these are pretty decent
Oh
prints. I
yeah.
do like a lot of them.
Absolutely.
Um, anyway, so we had redone some of my walls and stuff, and I was like getting decor focused. And as a gay, I hate an overhead light. I refuse to use an overhead light. I like mood lighting. I like the vibes. And like I've got my little neon sign back here, but that was kind of the only like vibey light in my apartment, and I was like, no, I need more. Oh, sorry, no, I do have a light up moon, which is also kind of vibey. But anyway, um, so I was like just talking to him about how I wanted to get these different lights in, and I was like, oh my god, I've seen these like TV like backlight things that are supposed to like reflect what's on your TV and like play it on the wall, which is like allegedly supposed to like reduce eye strain or whatever, but mainly it's just for the vibes. Um, and so I was like, that would be cool to have. Let me look on Amazon. But I was like, I'm not gonna buy it because they're not the cheapest thing that exists. Um, and then like my boyfriend wasn't trying to like influence me or do anything. He was just there to support me. And it took less than 5 minutes for me to bring this up to myself and then for me to buy these fucking things. And then they arrived the next morning. So I installed them and everything. And they're actually very slay. It's because you can do like all these different effects with them, or you can just have them reflectors on the TV. So I'm very into that. I also do still have an Amazon cart loaded of other decor items that I will be purchasing probably tomorrow since I get paid
Nice.
tomorrow. I'm living for decorating my space basically. That's what I'm into.
Love that for you.
What are you into?
Um well, in usual fashion, let me just read you some movies that I've watched in the last week because there's been some interesting ones. Here are the movies I have watched since we last spoke. American Mary, Slumber Party Massacre, Surf Nazis Must Die, Carnival of
Okay.
Souls, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, Lake Mungo, Carol, which was so lesbian, so hot. Kate Blanchett.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Kate Blanchett movie?
Um
Yeah. And
unrelated.
she's not a lesbian. Can you believe that?
I only learned that like last week when I was watching this, but I feel like she plays
It's so insulting.
doesn't she play I feel like this is not the only gay character she's played. I absolutely thought that she was like with a
It's
woman in real life.
absolutely not.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not, and
crazy.
she gives some of the most lesbian energy.
Yeah, she was amazing in that obviously, but pretty ladies. Um Unrelated, next I watched Killer Clowns from Outer Space, kind of the best movie I've ever seen. I watched this movie called Be My Cat. um it's Romanian
Okay.
and it's by this guy who the whole movie is it's like a mockumentary and he's filming himself, but his character, so he's also the director, but his character is filming this to go to Anne Hathaway to convince her to make this movie with him. And then in the movie like that we're watching, he is like filming these girls for his movie and showing Anne Hathaway how great his movie will be so that she can, but then he does like increasingly horrible things to the girls or whatever. It was so uncomfortable. uh
It sounds really
if you've ever
cerebral.
seen the movie Creep, it was a lot like that. But
Never seen that.
yeah. Anyway, that was a doozy. I watched Last House on the Left. I watched The People Under the Stairs, which is a Wes Craven movie I had never heard of. It's from the early 90s, so it predates Scream. It was fucking incredible. Less scary, more like, I mean, it's scary and how Scream is scary. There's like a couple of jump scares and like
Hmm.
creepy things, but it's about like these incestuous mom and dad, and the dad dresses up in a gimp suit and they keep people in their basement and lock their daughter in the attic. But then it's like the protagonist and the guy who saves the day is this like little 12-year old boy named Fool, and he's just like the best protagonist ever. And it was like one of the first like kind of self-aware movies where, like, for example, the kid opens the door and hears scary noises coming from the basement, and instead of like going down into the basement like a lot of movies before him, he goes like hell no or something like that and runs away. And it was like one of the first movies to do that. Anyway, it was incredible. I loved it. I watched the Poughkeepsie tapes. I
Hmm.
fucking hated it. It was torture porn and not even good acting. I hated it.
Uh,
Uh,
actoring.
Tremors, which was a Kevin Bacon movie. It was pretty good. It was kind of like a western. Also,
Is that Reba McEntire?
yes, with Reba McEntire, exactly. Kind of gay
I
vibes.
only know that because Trixie and Katya talk about it
Oh,
so much.
really? Um, I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, I didn't remember that, but yeah, no, Reba McEntire's in it, and it's kind of gay vibes, but like all westerns kind of are. High tension.
Well, the West was gay.
Yeah, we could get into that when we talk about like Hollywood, but yeah. High tension, Dogtooth, which was weird and also incestuous. I Spit on Your Grave, had to skip through half of it, too much torture porn. Shivers and Rabid, which are both David Cronenberg films. One of which the fear is that everybody will have to be vaccinated and walk around with a card that says they're vaccinated. But it came out in
Oh,
1977.
oh my god!
Anyway, so those are the
Triggered.
movies I have watched. I'm going insane.
That's a hey, Carolyn. That's a lot of
I'm watching
movies.
like 3 a day. Like,
That's
I
wild.
know.
How do you have time for
I
that?
literally don't know. I'm a good multitasker though.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Mutable sign.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take your word for it. But yeah, that's lots of movies. I mean in 2 weeks though, that's like, well, I guess that's like a movie a day, but I've watched like
I
3
mean,
movies some
I
days.
I couldn't tell you the last time I sat down and like actually watched a movie. That being said, though, I'm the type of person to be scrolling through Netflix and I'll see a movie that I want to watch and I'll be like, yeah, but I don't have the like energy or the mental like wherewithal to like sit through a whole movie. And then instead, I'll turn around and sit through like 6 hours of like a TV
For a
show or
while,
like a docu series.
there's like that one brand of video games that I like to play and nothing else, called The Elder Scrolls.
Hmm.
At some point, I got into watching these like 6-hour retrospectives of the game where you just like listen to a guy talk about like the interesting things in the game. It's not like I'm like sitting there watching it, but like I am watching it.
Well, so for our listeners, if there's one thing to know about Carolyn, if you've not already picked up on it, she loves a deep dive.
Oh my god, no kidding. I love a deep dive. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm into. Any
Well,
little
cool.
victories for you?
Yes, actually, I have been getting very good, or at least much better, about talking about my feelings and advocating for myself in a way that is not accusatory, and also not apologetic. So that's very slay for me. I've also been working on listening to other people's feelings without um without trying to be a fixer. This is salient in my brain right now because I literally had
Just
therapy
had
right
therapy,
before
yeah.
this, but yeah. Um so yeah, I'm feeling very good about that. I also um my plants are doing so good and I have gotten a couple more. I'm now up to I think like 18. Um and I'm just very very happy about all of that. Oh, and then another little victory. I've been telling myself that I was going to put up these fucking plant
Mm.
shelves for like 2 months now. Finally got them put up, and then as I said earlier, got my like wall space redecorated and rearranged, and it's just all very very good.
Love that.
So,
It's also the
yeah.
first
What
day.
about
It's the
you?
first day of spring for one thing.
Is that today or
I
tomorrow?
thought it was today. Maybe it's tomorrow.
Well,
Tomorrow
either way,
morning.
happy spring, happy Aries season, happy equinox.
Um, my victory is that some of my seeds are sprouting. I have
Oh
um
my gosh.
16 little planters set up next to my desk, which also means that I have a plant light um on during the day because I don't get natural light enough to grow seeds. But that also means that I have the harshest lighting I have ever had in my life,
Mm,
because it's like super bright white, and that's like what this lighting is, and like all my work calls. Um, but my seeds are sprouting, except for one, but they're not
I
supposed
love
to
that.
for like another couple days, so it's fine. But yeah.
I'm actually about to get some like indoor window box planters. They're like more oblong. Um because I have a bunch of like culinary herb seeds. And I had tried to grow a couple of them. I started growing some basil and they did sprout. They were doing pretty good. Um but I didn't know enough about plants at the time when I planted them. I had put them in this adorable little planter, but it didn't have any drainage holes.
Hmm.
And so at a certain point they stopped growing and then they kind of shriveled and I was like, well, okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
um I have one s- rosemary sprig that has grown from a seed and she's actually doing very well.
Nice.
She can't hold her own weight though because I don't think I
Oh.
planted her deep enough, but she is still growing. And then I had gotten some garlic from the grocery store, and I typically with garlic I just leave the bulb on the counter because I think it like deteriorates faster if you put it in the fridge. Um, and one of the little cloves had started to sprout. Like it didn't have any roots, but it had
Hmm.
the top little sprout, the green one.
You planted?
Um, and so I let that grow on the counter for a little bit, and then I planted it like a week ago. Um, and it's doing really good. But I'm excited for these planters because I just want to plant all these herbs, especially now that it's springtime, and I can
Yeah.
just fill up my windowsill with those. It'll be great
Oh, so fun.
because I've got an east facing window too, and it's fucking huge. So it's very good for all my plants and stuff. And I
Yeah.
finally got a humidifier for my
Mm.
tropical babies.
Nice.
So things are good.
Cool. Well,
All right. Well, anything else?
I don't think so. Anything else from you?
Okay. Not from me, other than to just say thank you for being an academic and doing all that
Thanks
research.
for letting me cancel
I'm not good at
yesterday. I
research.
literally could not do it.
Oh, you're fine. I had a bunch of stuff going on yesterday anyway. So
Cool. Okay.
awesome. Well,
Do the thing.
thank y'all so much for listening. To those of you that have, if you have enjoyed what you've heard and you are chomping at the bit to hear more, go ahead and follow us on socials. We are chronically inactive, but that's okay
I
because those
always
are our
forget
main
we have
channels.
socials. Fuck me, I'm sorry. That's my bad.
um, you can follow us on Mutable Immutable, or sorry, you can follow us on Instagram at Mutable Immutables. You can find us on Twitter at Immutables Pod. You can find us on YouTube at Mutable Immutables. We are also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And then also, if you've enjoyed it, or if you know us personally and you haven't done it already, go ahead and give us 5 stars. Just do it. It
Do
would be so
it.
cool of you. It would be honestly very, very slay. And it would be homophobic to not, because you would be choosing to not support a queer art form,
That's
right?
exactly what I've been telling them.
Yeah. How are you going to sleep at night? Yeah.
Um,
Anyway.
thanks. Bye.
All right.
Love ya.
Bye.